So as far as what is a performance improvement plan, a performance improvement plan, or a PIP, is a tool used by employers to address employees' poor performance. These are written documents that supervisors or management officials will issue to their employees regarding alleged poor performance. The PIP is required to specify why the performance is unacceptable. It's not sufficient to just issue a PIP without any explanation of why the performance is unacceptable. In addition, the plan must provide a plan, a plan for the employee to make their performance acceptable. A PIP is supposed to be for an employee to get better their performance. Naturally, it is supposed to be actually positive. It's supposed to outline how a employee could improve their performance and get better. But as an employee, it could have, obviously be looked at as a negative, given that your employer is saying your performance is currently not acceptable. But again, the purpose is to communicate and address the gaps of how performance is being conducted, to improve it and to amend it, and to make it better. Some common issues for why PIPs are issued are to correct work performance productivity issues, to address concerns documented in an unsatisfactory annual review, and provide employee time and resources to correct performance before serious step and disciplinary process is taken. Notably there, the PIPs are issued to address unsatisfactory performance reviews. A PIP should only be issued after there's prior notice of a performance issue, either through an evaluation or some kind of written counseling. And we'll talk more about that, but PIP should not be the first time an employee is becoming aware of any poor performance. We'll go to the next slide. So when is a performance plan issued? A PIP issued? It's issued when an employee is not performing well, according to their supervisors. As I just mentioned, a supervisor should be referring to, even in the PIP, previous warnings, verbal or written, and really preferably a poor performance evaluation. An employee such as yourselves shouldn't be becoming aware of poor performance through a PIP, because, as previously referenced, a PIP could be the step before a possible disciplinary action. So a performance improvement plan should be issued after some prior warning or notice of poor performance, because the PIP is supposed to be a place of corrective action, of how we can improve, what plan can we put in place. A PIP is likely to be more successful when the PIP is more specific and the supervisor recognizes there's a performance issue that needs to be corrected. And then there's feedback communication regarding the performance issues and that were previously communicated to the employee. And if they haven't been corrected, that supervisor follows up with this performance improvement plan to help have a corrective measure to prevent any future problems. But again, the overall point is that a PIP should be issued after a previous warning, but before any kind of disciplinary action is issued. As far as requirements for performance improvement plans in Texas, on our next slide, the general rule of law in Texas that is employment is at will, meaning that one's employment could be terminated for any reason at any time, so long as it's not an unlawful reason. An employer cannot terminate an employee for any unlawful reasons. So going off that, though, that employment at will status, a PIP is not actually required before an employee can be terminated or disciplined in Texas. There's actually case law to say that employers can change the terms and conditions of one employment provided the employee is given notice of the change beforehand. So I'm referencing this to say that in Texas, employment statuses are in the control of the employer, and a PIP is not necessarily required to fire somebody on poor performance. However, when a PIP is issued, there are certain requirements that need to be made for that PIP. The PIP needs to have the components as listed on the slide here. It needs to summarize why there's a poor performance, the prior performance record, what coaching happened, what warnings happened, what discussions happened with the employee. The PIP needs to have that. It needs to set the performance expectations, what the employee's job was, what the expectations for the job should have been set forth when the employee took the job. The PIP needs to summarize that and say why the employee is not meeting those expectations. If that PIP does not say that, that could be an issue with the PIP. It needs to establish deliverables, specific criteria for success. The PIP needs to state how an employee will now meet those performance expectations. If, for example, your expectation is to, if you're in sales, for example, and your expectation is to sell a certain number of items, that should have been set forth with you when you took the job. And if you're not meeting those that sales quota, you should have already been warned about it. And then if you weren't still meeting those expectations, the performance improvement plan should outline how your supervisors or managers plan to have you achieve that expectation, whether it's through providing more coaching or providing, different types of clients or whatnot. And that could be applied to different industries, but the PIP will set forth how that employee will meet that expectation that's set forth in their performance plans. And going along with that, this expectation needs to be specific. What will that employee do to hit that sales quota? Does that employee need to have a number more calls to prospective clients? So it just needs to have specific expectations. A time period. Now, the PIP needs to have a period of time the employee gets back up to standard. There is not a set period of time. I've seen 30 days. I've seen 90 days. There isn't a set period, but it needs to establish some period of time. If it doesn't have a period of time, then the employer could issue the PIP and then the next day say you didn't meet the standard. So a valid PIP will have a set time frame for the employee to meet up to standards. If the PIP does not, then that needs to be questioned to the supervisor. The PIP needs to identify the training and support available during the PIP period, the performance improvement plan period. This means that the PIP needs to identify how the employee will meet that standard, what is available to the employee to help meet that standard, whether it's through weekly meetings with their supervisors to go over the progress of that employee, what different trainings are there, what a different support can the employee be provided. That PIP needs to outline that. And then the PIP needs to identify the consequences for failing the performance improvement plan. It needs to identify if you do not pass this performance improvement plan, you may be disciplined. Or if it's not disciplined, you may be subject to another PIP. It needs to identify the specific requirements or the specific consequences for what would happen to an employee if they do not pass this performance improvement plan. If it doesn't, it could be deemed insufficient. As far as performance improvement plan meetings, so I referenced in the previous slide, and we can move on to the next slide, but I referenced in the previous slide about what support could be provided. And often during performance improvement plan periods, there are meetings with the employee and the supervisor. These are often ways in which employers could state they're providing support to that employee. So these meetings are often one-on-one meetings with a supervisor, and an HR person may even be in the room at some times to take notes, but it's at least with the supervisor and the employee to discuss how the previous week or certain period of time has gone and what progression has been made. So for the meetings as an employee, here's what I would advise to do. First of all, for any meeting you're having, you need to be taking as much notes as possible, saying what your supervisor is saying, how you did not do, because this could, set up for later in case there's an allegation you did not pass a performance improvement plan. You could say, well, according to my notes on November 20th, during our meeting, we discussed how I was improving. So you need to have those notes because, like I said, there could be an HR person in the room from the employer side taking notes on their end. So you need to be taking notes on your end to make sure that you're documenting everything that's discussed. You also need to ask during the meeting, what is the issue? What did I do wrong? How could I improve? You need to ask that each and every time you have a meeting with a supervisor during the performance improvement plan period. You need to gather all the data and background about the performance issue. Why is my performance being alleged to be insufficient? Who has claimed my performance is insufficient? Are you the only one, meaning you, my supervisor, the only one that's saying that I'm the only person that's not sufficient in my work? What can I do to improve? Do you have any documentation? Do you have any examples of my poor work performance? You need to be asking those questions because if you don't, they may not give it to you and they may think you already know. So you need to ask the supervisors or whomever is conducting the meeting to provide that feedback, provide those examples of how you're not performing your job correctly. And define the performance problem, whether it's not meeting that sales quota, I mentioned earlier, whether it's written work product, maybe they're alleging your writing is not sufficient, your management style, if you're a manager, isn't sufficient. Define what the issue is. The PIP should do it, but it's also good to discuss that with the supervisor to understand what is the issue as they frame it. Okay. And then what is the cause of the issue? Is it, well, I didn't know I was supposed to be managing employees. I didn't know that I was supposed to be meeting the sales quota. Is it unclear expectations? And, that could be discussion during the PIP meeting. But if the supervisor clarifies that they want you to meet this goal, and then you understand that's the goal you need to meet. If that's a goal you don't think you were hired to do or you do not want to meet, that's a different conversation. That's a conversation of whether or not you need to be reassigned to a new position or change your employment status. But so long as there is a clear expectation and you feel that you can make that expectation, then you need to do during the performance plan period, meet with your supervisor to understand how you can meet that expectation. But it's important to understand during these meetings what issues are arising. Even if it's during the second or third meeting and your supervisor is still saying you're not performing well, you need to identify what issues have arisen again, or what new issues have happened. Develop a plan yourself. Say, okay, this is your plan that you're giving me, but this is what I propose. What if I propose that I meet this goal of this week, and then the next week I, increase it? What if I do this deliverable this week? Propose a counter proposal to the supervisor. And then maybe that different proposal could be agreed upon. Or if the supervisor does not want to budge on how their plan, discuss what you need to do to, meet that performance issue. Develop a plan of action for improvement. And this should go without saying, but attend every meeting the supervisor sets up. Of course, if there's leave that comes up, certain issues that are out of your control, please notify your supervisor and you can't attend that meeting. But it's important if there's a meeting scheduled to attend it. Even if you disagree with the PIP, you need to attend the meeting. If you don't, the supervisor will document that and use that as a reason later on if you don't pass the PIP for any possible disciplinary action. So it's very important to attend every PIP meeting that you're able to. And regarding the next slide, how to address requirements of a performance improvement plan. So your supervisor will closely monitor your performance during the PIP period. And even if you don't think your supervisor is, your supervisor will be monitoring or even having somebody else help monitor. So always bring your A game. If you've been issued a PIP, you want to make sure that you are performing as best as possible on your job or seeking feedback through those meetings we were just discussing as far as how you can improve. Of course, this could be a stressful period of time. So if you do need that assistance, it is important to document that you need that assistance and make it known to your supervisor or your human resources official what assistance you need. But it is critical to avoid any discipline that you deliver as much work product as possible, as bestly as possible. Because, I'm emphasizing this point because if you're under a PIP, again, it could lead to disciplinary action if you don't pass the PIP. So it is important to make sure that you have work product that an employer or a reasonable person cannot say your work performance is deficient. The employers sometimes do fabricate claims of poor work performance and use these PIPs to conceal motivations of discrimination or retaliation. Proactive intervention is critical as it is easier to dispute a PIP earlier than later on in the process. So what this means is that you want to be as proactive as possible when you get the PIP. If you were issued a PIP, you want to ask those questions, like I mentioned in the last slide, as far as examples, as far as what evidence do you have behind the PIP, especially if this is your first warning of poor performance. You want to be able to try to dispute or challenge the reasons for the PIP as early as possible to get that evidence and take those notes as well. And even if necessary, after the PIP meeting, write an email to HR or your supervisor summarizing what just occurred. It's easier to do that early on in the process than do it after or later on in the process, because if you don't do it at the beginning, it will make it look like, well, if it's looking like you're going to fail the PIP, so now you're going to challenge it. But if you do it at the beginning, it sets forth that you were in disagreement from the get-go. So it's very important to be proactive as possible to challenge any insinuation or possibility that the performance is not is fabricated. The performance issues are fabricated by the employer. How to challenge a performance improvement plan on the next slide. So a PIP can be challenged as an act of retaliation. If there's a causal connection between the issues of a PIP as some form of retaliation, a challenge could be achievable. For example, if you complain to HR or complain to a manager about issues in your workplace, it could be possible retaliation if the PIP occurs shortly thereafter. The complaints could be complaints of discrimination. It could be complaints of illegality in the workplace, unsafe work conditions. It's possible that after, if you receive a PIP or any allegation of poor performance after making those complaints, that the PIP could be viewed as an act of retaliation, especially if the person that's issuing the PIP was the same person you complained to, or you have proof that the person that issued the PIP was aware of your complaints. Or if you were associated with somebody that was complaining, one of your coworkers has been going through harassment, has complained, and everyone knows that you're best friends or you work closely with them. And so the supervisor decides, well, I'm going to issue a PIP to both of you, or I'm going to issue the PIP to you to make sure you don't help out her complaint or him or her complaint. So that's something that can be viewed as retaliation. As far as an adverse action, in Texas, the placement on a performance improvement plan alone is not enough to meet an adverse action requirement. Meaning, if you have not claimed retaliation, but are only trying to claim that I'm being treated differently because I'm put on a PIP, that's not going to be enough alone to allege discrimination. To say I'm being treated differently based on my race, color, sex, national origin, disability, religion, or any other protected category. You're going to need additional actions. Now, often this isn't that difficult because a PIP, there's usually other actions that have happened, a prior warning or counseling that has been issued, or possible demotion or suspension that has been issued. So typically there are other actions that employees that have happened that will create that hostile work environment. But if it's just the PIP alone and nothing else, it's not going to qualify as discrimination. It's going to need additional incidents along with the PIP to qualify as a hostile work environment or to allege that adverse action requirement. However, as I led off this portion of the presentation, you can use a PIP as retaliation. If it's just the PIP alone, you could use it as retaliation. And we cited some cases on here to describe that. So what to do when a performance improvement plan has ended? First, document the conclusion of the PIP. The employer should document it by saying you passed or failed the PIP with a written notification. However, you'll just want to document it yourself as well, to yourself and an email to your employer saying, thank you, I have passed the PIP, or today you told me I did not pass the PIP. This is why I did not pass, or this is what you told me why I passed the PIP, why I'm no longer under a performance improvement plan. You want to confirm that the performance improvement plan is completed. They're not asking you to continue on the performance improvement plan. And that is notable because sometimes employers will say, we need to extend this period of time. Sometimes it is to your benefit as an employee to extend that period of time. If an employer is saying, well, we're coming up on the 30-day period that your PIP is ending and I don't believe your performance is improving, you could document to your employer, well, I would like another 30 days. I don't think this 30 days was a sufficient amount of time. I've had, other events happen that has interfered with my improvement in this area, so I want more time. But if that period of time is concluded, you just want to make sure that it's in writing that it has concluded. But if it's not concluded or it's concluded not to your satisfaction, you need to ask questions to your supervisors. What more is required? What else do you need of me to improve my performance? Sometimes employers will just say the PIP is over. So you need to say, well, do I need anything else to do? Is my performance improved? Am I being considered for discipline? That just needs to be questioned and assured, before you just move on from this situation. Consider any challenges you want to make to the PIP. We've talked about the retaliation and discrimination. You could allege if your company has any grievance procedures, internal grievance procedures to challenge a performance improvement plan, make sure to utilize those. Sometimes companies will have certain deadlines to file grievances regarding a performance improvement plan. So make sure to file those on time. And that's at the end of the PIP. If the PIP has resulted not to your satisfaction, then make sure your deadlines to file a grievance. So consider those challenges you want to make if you don't feel that PIP was issued to you in a satisfactory fashion. If you pass the PIP, consider whether you want to make changes to your employment. Well, and this means, well, you just passed a performance improvement plan. You've improved your performance according to your supervisor, but you're still in disagreement about why it was issued. So you may want to consider, well, do I want to continue working under the supervisor? Or should I request a change in supervision? Should I apply to a different position within the company? Should I leave this employer altogether? Do I really want to work in this environment? That's something you need to consider as well. Because I understand that being under a PIP, even passing a PIP, still doesn't make most employees feel the greatest. And a lot of employees will want to change their environment to have that not happen again. Well, that was the summary of performance improvement plans in Texas. And that's what I wanted to go over. Do we have any questions?
We haven't received any questions, Michael, so.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Well, you have Tully Rinckey's information there on your screen. I believe this presentation will also be posted as well. So we still don't have any questions, just to confirm?
No questions.
Okay. So thank you for joining us here today. I'm glad to be able to speak with you.